Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Left Bank Books welcomes award-winning Puerto Rican poet, translator, and editor Raquel Salas Rivera, who will discuss his new book, Antes que Isla es Volcán, Before Island is Volcano. Salas Rivera will be in conversation with poet Farid Matuk. And I'm Jeff Shervin, a bookseller for Left Bank Books. Left Bank Books is the oldest independent bookstore in St. Louis. We produce hundreds of author events each year with a fantastic team here in St. Louis. We're happy to bring our events series virtual. We believe that events are a way to expand your mind and make the world a better place. We hope you enjoy this event, and we hope you support Left Bank Books by purchasing a copy on our website at left-bank.com. Purchasing a copy from Left Bank Books allows us to keep our bookstore and staff operating. Thank you for your support. We'll be taking questions from the audience at the end, so please type your questions as comments in the bottom throughout the broadcast. Now, a few quick words about our guests. Raquel Salas Rivera is a Puerto Rican poet, translator, and editor. His honors include being named the 2018-19 Poet Laureate of Philadelphia and receiving the New Voices Award from Puerto Rico's Festival de la Palabra. He is the author of 5 previous full-length poetry books. His third book, terciario, the tertiary, won the Lambda Literary Award for Transgender Poetry and was longlisted for the 2018 National Book Award. His fourth book, While They Sleep, Under the Bed is Another Country, was longlisted for the 2020 PEN America Open Book Award and was a finalist for CLMP's 2020 Firecracker Award. His fifth book, exis, won the inaugural Ambroggio Prize. He currently writes and teaches in Puerto Rico. And for our other guest, a queer writer of mixed Syrian and Peruvian heritage, Farid Matuk has lived in the US since the age of 6 as an undocumented person, a quote-unquote legal resident, and a naturalized citizen. He is the author of the poetry collections This Is a Nice Neighborhood from Letter Machine and The Real Horse from University of Arizona Press, and of several chapbooks, including My Daughter La Chola from Asada. His work has been anthologized in the Best American Experimental Poetry and in Angels of the Americlips, an anthology of new Latinate writing, among others. Matuk serves as poetry editor at Fence and on the editorial board for the book series Research and Creative Writing at Bloomsbury. His work has been supported most recently by residencies and grants from the Headlands Center for the Arts and the Landon Foundation, and a Visiting Holloway Professorship in Poetry and Poetics at UC Berkeley. Matuk's book arts project, Redolent, made in collaboration with visual artist Nancy Friedemann-Sánchez, is forthcoming from Singing Saw Press. And now, I'd like to welcome our guests for the evening, Raquel Salas Rivera and Farid Matuk for Left Bank Books. Please applaud them virtually as they make their appearances. All right. And I guess we'll begin with poetry readings from both of you.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll start to warm things up. Such a pleasure to be here with my friend. A little correction to the bio, it's a little outdated. I no longer have those editorial roles at Fence magazine and at the book series, but it was a good run and a lot of fun to do. So I'm thrilled to be here in support of this book and of my friend. I want to offer this reading in all the love that I have for my friend Raquel and in solidarity with Puerto Rican independence, understanding that no state could ever hold all the love it takes to imagine that freedom. I want to start with an epigraph in that vein. It's all somewhere else. No one lives in a country. Alice Notley. All right, you light-headed fathers. I'd ask for rain. Wait until January because I was born with a sash. This is where you shit. This, I'm told, is a drawer for aftershave. Knowing things, systems that take hundreds of years, earns us harrowing honors that get smeared. Some of it sticks. I mean, you could make believe a thing exists like a pine cone opening. But for daddy's spit, is it also the tree's many a small mouth? I hear of sovereignties. I hear of the first world. But having survived, facing off with the progeny, ancestors, I'm told, will be no prophylactics against it. In our bodies, there are no borders, the new Aeromexico ad says. So here come the killers and their rhetors. John Bolton, Elliot Abrams, Juan Zarate of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Here, I'm told, is a song. George Zimmerman, whose countrymen. When poems don't want titles, I call them poems. So this is poem. What so goes? Human, cat, bird, pyramid being only half the code. If words could clear the way under cold-beaked night birds flying between houses in the big streets of our new neighborhood, not waiting but available, I walk around the car, falling forward at the inside edge of that urgency, leaking. Even when going in the wake of a surviving mother, reaches to the edges of everything historical. We hear kissing and burying the dead body with love earns the right to see it from outsourced internet scrubbers paid to hide the pics of state plunder lighting itself plainly, showing a little more badge, a little more detention center crowding, grooms citizens with eyes so brimmed. We're fictions like men, incapable and written, lulled as by our governess with our wound entwined. Space isn't empty where we're going to look at the stars. I can see my love in the chaparral lying with me in a blanket because the absent are cold. And it's not a word I can wear. It's not a word that goes into me. The code so impeccably formed in the work of a voice at the inside, outside edge of any mouth. The wound won't be figured when it's just apply on the surface magic that folds into me. I miss my mother's smile. I miss my youth. But this doesn't mean those truths. I'm alone, I'm told, but decorated in English script. Or I'm given in the dream with the night birds where we were going to look closer at the stars, who looked back, gendered in that pictorial tradition, with eyes available with no claim to the words, shining on the empty spaces where the killed would have been, whether mine or not to love. In the dream which stands for nothing, lying shallow, on the least water of waking day floating down the river along the banks of the miniature towns, in Disneyland's storybook land, ordered and still is a reliable comfort our migrant neighborhood shrinks from delivering. Never miniature enough from minimum a red mineral that illuminated the medieval manuscripts. With pictures in filigree, a voice could splice, then bind time's folding surgery. This poem is titled August 2, 1990 to February 28, 1991, which absurdly are the dates of the official dates given for the US invasion of Iraq. In that time, I was finishing high school, and it was popular to see a certain t-shirt that gets described in the poem. Well habituated, resisting a tender regard wherein all else, must else, all else. Bold slogan carried forth, burn this one on a spiraling way of apostrophe, cursed without cause. Someone being called by whose word as the placeholder for the conscript. So sociable, the sentence, offering its beers, exchanging decades, the sounds and colors of each next face, pressed into air's ravines, glancing into wind's crevices, packed tight with foreign or neighborly dead, else the local peace. Try and burn this one, flag and word, on a white boy's t-shirt. I read the invitation to come close. Across the creases of the skies, a sentence covers with discretion, barely falling through the air of having survived men by engendering, pouring men into men, so begotten by just being around and trying on one another's things. In language, we inherit the voices of the dead, Nathaniel Mackey said. And where else? If I ask so, having been said so, blushing, off leash. Did you want me to follow? The sentence hoped how many would try. I'm going to sit here all day in the piece you made and write about it. All the times and tenses in the sentence. Unread, your old t-shirt, alone, getting dressed, a little morning cold about your shoulder, walking past, reading the t-shirt, had been inviting, not the t-shirt, but the print, will invite, accepting, going to try, will have been trying, etc. If you have to ask, etc., light this one. Fire's vacuum, thinking it's the space the invitation cared to fill. Like a dream where every sign tells me you're dangerous, thinks that waking life is listening. I lean into the promise in the sentence, try to survive, telling you you are a good man because you have peaceful energy. The dream trying to wish this truth into you as one incarnate, as one representative. But placeholders and conscripts helix through time and tense. This one, volunteer, trying on a sentence, then another, friendly trying, being punished for trying, did try, will have been, thought to be trying, inviting, dressing in a promise, doubles back to will have had nothing to wear but punishment. Maybe in the conversation, I hope that we can get into the ways that masculinity and statehood rhyme off each other. It's a lot of what these poems are thinking through. And this next poem is that. It's called The Great Commission after Reno Gold, who is the sex worker named in the poem. Gifts for the nerve. The pads of the feet wake to dirt. A kiss traps two mouths. A kiss turns the words inside in. My friend says a girl's sexuality is not a death drive, neither a boy's. But oh, how men hail a man's at every chance among men. A sameness in stones, metamorphic in leaders, gravitas, and buddies. Up arrow, good feeling, signs sag. The institutional heads were awful but dumb. They were full of reasoning, boundary keeping, rolling hills where to golf. Down arrow, conviction mild or fierce. Could not claim praise, the authority to submit enough. End time, evening, more likely morning, slacken in Trinity with each next customer. This is Scale Up, dedicated to my friend Fadi Judah. Dignified or bruised with looking at an inflatable swan in my pool, large as our times, dares all ancestors to scale up. Desert heat waves folding air forward and back into a fixed point. a hold on our mother's adulthood like it's the thing from which most of time will run away. The purest gold rings I inherit, my grandmother's bracelets stamped with the scales of snakes. We had so much. Ideas, tasks that don't really ask for names, to burn in some America's idea of presentness. Peeled, cheap rubies given from my mother's ring, loosely given in a pouch. Terribly enjoined to the bros of first settlement. Every day, still in their dedicated habit for one another, men love me. Ask about my American sentence shapes like barefoot, sweet thing, Proud Boys, no fap, the New York Times, of people's bad examples of transiting elements. Now crush the buds in the old way in boiling water to make the resin stretched with a friend into thinning sheets from our mouths and fingers comes a lacquer, where to render any of the pretender gods. Scaled to look like layers of depth the men heard they wanted to see if our treatments could rescue local wood into a high gloss forevering. Exactly like the phrase, cultivate your power, brings news to each next theater of war, resting in my nerve to write about it. Tear gas by way of drone in the lacquered frame of my mirror, wanting to be polished. Now say, enjoyable morning, to have left a nation's bed, shining, basically eagle-shaped, tasting of a sugar that delays what's sweet. Sorry, not sorry, for the dirt on my feet. And I'll end with a song called Queer Paloma Family, and it's a torturing, intentional torturing of Caetano Veloso's Cucuru Paloma. Jura cuando regreses que aún del más allá regresarás, y jura que cuando regreses sintonizarás nuestras lenguas andantes con ese silencio tan amariconado, refulgente y fugaz, que juran que es ese el silencio que doblará esos futuros hacia nuestras familias en los barquitos sin patria mariconadas, impecables y radiantes, cada una tan galán que remo en remo se tiran hacia el desierto donde ese silencio se concentrará en un puntito de la noche de miedo incapaz, y jura que en nuestras lenguas ese punto es una piedra de sabor de sal que nos sostiene a través de los futuros, y así sostenidos, lamiendo sal, palabras equivocadas, es como nos juntaremos los errantes y así regresaremos. Thank you.
Un placer estar aquí con Farid. It's a pleasure to be here with Farid. Okay. I'm not gonna gush about Farid because I'll get all emotional. This is a very serious reading. I'm going to read from Antes que Islas Volcán. It's divided into a few sections, and I'm trying each reading to read very different set of poems. We'll see how that goes. Y porque naciste aquí. Una cartelera anuncia la construcción de la nueva planta eléctrica al lado de la cancha donde juegas a estudiar. Te enfermas porque le dijeron a tus padres que las manchas en el cielo eran renovaciones. De prueba confeccionaron la iglesia pentecostal y su estacionamiento. Alguien sembró una mesa en el parque y ofreció tarot gratis para decirte que en 2 décadas el gobierno vaciaría tus ahorros. Rezas y rezas para que mejore la situación económica de tu barrio. Te contestan máquinas que ofrecen opciones numéricas. Sabes que ninguna solución es lineal. El GPS te envía por la calle que ya no existe, pero conoces las playas de memoria y sus relaciones con el cemento, como si esto fuese tu historia, tu centellante ferrocarril. Los viejos tratan de no morirse a pesar del cáncer y del odio persistente de los gobernantes. Eres joven y subvencionas tu vida con chiringas y cine, pero también te enfermas porque el agua está enferma, porque los edificios tienen asbestos, porque tus pies tocan el suelo y duermes respirando. And because you were born here, a billboard announces the construction of the new electric plant next to the basketball court where you play like you study. Because they told your parents the stains in the sky were renovations, the proof they offered was the Pentecostal church and its parking. Someone planted a table in the park, offered free tarot, and read that in 2 decades your government would empty your account. You pray and pray your barrio's economic situation will improve. You're answered by machines that offer you numerical options. You know no solution is linear. The GPS sends you down a street that no longer exists, but you memorize speeches and their relations to cement as if these were your history, this your scintillating railway. The elders try not to die despite cancer, and our rulers' persistent hate. You are young and subsidize your life with kites and films, but you also get sick because the water is sick, because the buildings have asbestos, because your feet touch the ground and you breathe while you sleep. Julia Kelleher was the Secretary of Education. She is from a suburb of Philadelphia, where I lived for 8 years. And she is not Puerto Rican, but she was Puerto Rico's Secretary of Education. And she was key in the closure of over 500 schools, infamous for being very corrupt and selling, kind of striking a deal with selling a school in exchange for only having to pay, I believe, $1 for a condo, for an upscale condo. Anyways, this poem is called Julia Kelleher confiesa que cree en el fin de la historia. Titán fila niños y le da a cada uno una goma. Dice, entren a sus libros y borren los nombres de los asesinos de sus nietos. Se miran. Uno se atreve a preguntar, ¿quiénes son los asesinos? Tita, con dedo largo y mano ancha, grita hacia el techo, crucificada por el motor del aire. Tienen las mismas caras y los mismos apellidos que los asesinos de tus abuelos, se parecen a los jefes de tus padres, gobiernan, dirigen en las luces, se reclinan contra sus motoras. Todos comienzan a llorar desesperados. Sus caras se derriten del frío del motor, del aire acondicionado donde un pájaro siembra un nido. No saben dibujar nada en los libros, no saben imaginarse borrando pasados. Una gran bola playera se desinfla en sus manos. Un perro sarnoso les lame los oídos, los enchufes tiran chispas, tos colectiva, plagas de zapatos embachados. Nadie sabe reconocer los asesinos. Todos Se van a morir. Nada la voz de Tita hacia sus bocas desamparadas. Las 400 escuelas cerraron. Nadie sabe lo que es un borrador ni lo que es un lápiz. Los libros de historia exponen crónicas vivas, un canto de la pizarra es un espejo roto. Los niños siguen sin saber quiénes asesinan sus futuros. Borran sus propias caras, confundidos. Julia Kelleher confesses she believes in the end of history. Tita lines up the children and gives each an eraser. She says, "Open your books and erase the names of your grandchildren's assassins." They stare at each other. One dares ask, "Who are the assassins?" Tita, with a long finger and a wide hand, screams toward the roof, crucified by the air's motor. They have the same faces and last names as your grandparents' assassins. They look like your parents' bosses. They govern, they direct traffic, they lean against their motorcycles. And the children start desperately crying. Their faces melt from the air conditioner's cold where a bird plants a nest. They don't know how to draw nothings in books. They don't know how to imagine themselves by erasing pasts. A great beach ball deflates in their hands. A mangy dog licks their ears. The outlets throw sparks, collective cough, plagues of soaked shoes. No one knows how to recognize assassins. You're all going to die. Tita's voice swims towards their helpless mouths. 400 schools closed. No one knows about erasers or pencils. History books expose their life crónicas. A chalkboard shard is a broken mirror. The children have no idea who assassinates their futures. They erase their own faces, confused. Voy a leer de la sección Isla. Son poemas un poco cortos y dialoga con la tempestad de Shakespeare. I'm going to read from the section Island, and the poems are quite short. They're in dialogue with Shakespeare's The Tempest. Tempestad. Viento concentrado. Un odio que parece la despedida entre países. Tempest. A concentrated wind. A hate that looks like a goodbye between countries. Extinction. Extinción. Los cruceros llevan extintores porque aún rodeados de agua nos puede consumir el fuego. Extinction. Cruise ships carry extinguishers because even when surrounded by water, we can still be consumed by fire. Historia. Nacer de la impaciencia de un río que no se congela, la inseguridad de un habla que nunca se graba. History. Born from the impatience of a river that doesn't freeze, the insecurity of a language that leaves no record. Representación. Sellada mi boca de la tuya vestida. Representation. My sealed mouth dressed as yours. Teoría del abandono. Mientras más grande es la brecha, más rápido nos lanzamos al vacío. Abandonment theory. The wider the gap, the faster we speed toward the cliff. Teoría de la dependencia. Mientras más nos quitan, más les entregamos. Dependency theory. The more they take, the more we give. Calibán a sus amigos. No tengan miedo, no son ruidos, son canciones. Caliban to his friends. Don't be afraid, those aren't noises, they are songs. Calibán a Shakespeare. De sícorax, coquíes, cucubanos y luciérnagas, que llamaste sapos, escarabajos y luces. Caliban to Shakespeare. By sycorax, coquíes, cucubanos, and fireflies, which you called frogs, beetles, and lights. You can hear the cookies. Cookie, cookie. Farid earlier asked if there were birds. No, they're tiny little frogs. Calibán Ariel. Me encadenaste para liberarte de un amo en común y todavía piensas que yo soy el caníbal. Caliban to Ariel. You chained me to free yourself from our common master, and you still believe I am the cannibal. Calibán a la tempestad. Dependes del viento, dependes del humor azaroso del mar tiránico, mandas desde tu dependencia. Caliban to the tempest. You depend on the wind, you depend on the sea's arbitrary mood, ruling tyrannically from your dependence. Calibán a Próspero. Me raptaste de mi hogar, castigándome por no llamarte mister. Aprendí tus malas palabras, te maldije en tu idioma para que entendieras. Nunca entendiste. Decías que mi acento era muy fuerte. Caliban to Próspero. You stole me from my home, punished me for not calling you mister. I learned your bad words, cursed you in your language so you would understand. You never understood. You told me my accent was too thick. Y nada, voy a leer uno de la serie de la independencia de Puerto Rico. I'm going to read one from the series The Independence of Puerto Rico. Es un multiverso que comienza con un epígrafe de Fanon que voy a leer, y la idea es que cada poema tiene el mismo título, La Independencia de Puerto Rico, y un poquito, podemos hablarlo un poco en el Q&A, pero todos los caminos, como la idea es que todos los caminos llegan a la independencia de Puerto Rico. So I'm going to read from the section, The Independence of Puerto Rico, which starts with this epigraph. And I'm going to read the epigraph, and the sort of idea was that each title has the same title, The Independence of Puerto Rico, and the section, each poem has the same title. And they're all sort of leading to the same place, which is the independence of Puerto Rico. It's a multiverse. The first thing the colonized learns is to stay in his place and not go beyond his limits. This is why the dreams of the colonized are always of muscular prowess. His dreams are of action and aggression. I dream I am jumping, swimming, running, climbing. I dream that I burst out laughing, that I span a river in one stride, or that I am followed by a flood of motor cars which can never catch up with me. During the period of colonization, the colonized never stops achieving his freedom from 9 in the evening until 6 in the morning. La independencia de Puerto Rico. Un camino de migajas hasta la boca. La caverna acuosa deslumbrada por dientes, ahí recogidas no crean pan de agua. Recogidas las sonrisas no crean risa. Recogidos los reojos no crean ojo. Los platos repartidos no suman cena. Reunidas las concesiones termales. Ductos conectan el llanto al aire. Reunidos los llantos no crean playa, ni playas reunidas nos hacen isla. Juntadas las furias no crean tormenta. Las chispas aisladas no dan pa'l fuego. El poco a poco no llega a nada. No es que no ame los detalles. En diminutivo no sobrevivo. Pero juntos estamos solos, unidos por compras y días feriados. No quiero eso. Quiero que no sean filas nuestras reuniones. Nos empeñamos en la pared. Dejemos el museo del acumulo. Superemos esto como superamos tanto, a velocidad de Martín Pescador y asalto con bala. La terapia que nos damos con tragos y puños duraría más con querernos vivos. Los surcos sirven para producir un fruto que se entrega a un Dios con las manos apuntadas hacia el cielo, hacia el vacío. Generaciones bien buena gente, linajes enteros de dadivosos. Qué lindo darnos, pero no esto. Esto es otra cosa. Llega salidas y aquí seguimos saliendo de lo mismo. No nos queremos cuando nos damos así. No nos hagamos eso. Nos queda mal tanto camino, tanto horizonte, si no sabemos volver a casa. The Independence of Puerto Rico. A path of crumbs up to the mouth, the aqueous cavern dazzled by teeth gathered there don't make pan de agua. Smiles gathered don't make laughter, side eyes gathered don't make an eye. Dispensed plates don't make a dinner, the thermal concessions meet, the ducks connect tears to air. Together tears don't make a beach, nor gathered beaches make us island. Furies grouped don't make a storm. Isolated sparks don't start a fire. Little by little leads nowhere. It's not that I don't love details. In diminutive, I survive us, but together we're lonely, joined by holidays and shopping. I don't want this. I want our meetings not to be lines. We persist on the wall. Let's leave behind the museum of accumulation. Let's overcome this like we overcome so much at the speed of a kingfisher and a bulleted mugging. The therapy we give ourselves with shots and fists would last more if we wanted to live. Furrows help us produce fruit we give to a God, our hands pointing towards nothing. Generations of good folk, entire lineages of givers. How beautiful to give ourselves, but no, not this. This is something else. This reaches exits, and here we are still exiting the same thing. We don't love ourselves when we give like this. Let's not do this to us. So much road looks bad. So much horizon if we forget our way back home. Y como último, and as the last poem, I'm going to read the only poem that's in Spanish in both versions, and it's a homage to José Martí, his versos sencillos, it's versos complejos, and it's the poem that gives title to the book. Unlike Martí, I don't just use the octasyllable, which would be 8 each verse, but rather I try to alternate between 8 and 7. Versos complejos para José Martí. Yo soy poeta arrancado de donde crece el mango, y antes de morirme quiero ver aquel que me cegó. Yo vengo de todas partes, pero a mi pueblo yo voy. Hambre soy entre las hambres, la hambruna de donde soy. Yo sé los nombres extraños de hombres que no nos quieren y que por mortales años espero y no vienen. Llover sobre mi cabeza siento en la noche clara, luces en ciudad oscura, estrellas liberadas. Vi alas nacer en los hombros de amigos tan hermosos que andan entre nosotros sin más susto a los odios. He visto surgir un hombre de entre balas reunidas y he visto morir a un hombre que amó toda la vida. Tan rápido como el miedo, 2 veces vi el alma, 2, cuando gritamos los fieros, cuando perdimos la voz. Temblé una vez en la cama, el día en la ventana, cuando la bárbara vela quemó su piel amada. Gocé una vez en la calle al ver mis versos volar, pues supe que no hay quien calle la voz que puede migrar. Hoy oigo un ladrar a través de rejas y oscuridad, y no son ladridos, es testigo de la maldad. Si dicen que de mi patio tome la fruta, mejor agarro el limón más agrio, no la que me dio el amor. He visto el techo herido volar azul sereno y hombre morirse en el frío buscando techo nuevo. Yo sé bien cuando el mundo se cansa de sí mismo, porque ya es muy tarde cuando va a enfrentarse al fascismo. He puesto mi pecho armado de furor y tristeza sobre aquel beso pesado que baja la cabeza. En una cáscara dura hoy envaino mis penas, porque un pueblo que no llora me recorre las venas. Todo es hermoso y violento, todo se angustia por pan, y todo como la tierra antes que islas volcán. Yo sé que el listo se canta, filántropo y artista, pero deja atrás su obra, la pobreza y conquista. Callo, no lo entiendo y me voy, sin hacerme ya el fuerte. Cuelgo mi futuro por hoy, lejos de tanta muerte. Thank you. And maybe Farid can now join me and we can talk for a little bit.
It was beautiful. Thank you.
It was beautiful to hear you. Thank you for joining me.
So I really want to start. I want to start by celebrating something that I think is actually rare. You're one of my closest poet friends who nerds out on the technicality of language. So like you're counting those syllables, you know, and I have to say, like, it's rare in the world, but I love my friends because all my friends, this is not rare among all my friends, but I think it's weirdly rare among poets. And I just want to celebrate that level of skill and that level of attention and mastery that you bring to so many of your works. And maybe that's like a way to start. Like, well,
Thank
you know,
you.
it's like
it's such a nice compliment because honestly, maybe it's an overcompensation of a sort, because I feel like I sort of refuse not to write about topics that get labeled often as political. And it's interesting because I was talking with a younger poet and they asked me what I noticed is a shift generationally, and I was like, well, I feel like a younger generation of poets doesn't care about the question that my generation was subjected to, which was, you know, like, what's this division between the political and the artistic and the formal, and I always found it really absurd because I was like, well, I mean, what do we call poets like Miguel Hernandez, writing anti-fascist poetry? You know, like, you know, it just feels so forced as a distinction, right? And it comes actually from like Sartre, right, and his notion of poesía comprometida, you know, committed poetry, which is born in the 20th century. So it's a little also like, it's like it doesn't know its own history as a term almost. So it is nice to hear that. Maybe it's an overcompensation. Maybe I just really like it. I don't know. I was always impressed by Los Versos Sencillos de Martí. I was like, how does he do that? How does he, in such a simple way, sort of pack everything in? I also honestly was impressed by Shakespeare's ability to do that, you know, in a way that it was painful because you know, the things he was writing about, the way he was writing about them were painful. But he did it in such a beautiful way that it really killed me because I was like, oh, I hate you so much. You're doing this so well. But yeah, but I took from that as much as I could, right? And I try to pay homage to that and see myself historically, which is something that in our conversations has come up. Like we talk about that, right? Like what kind of like what is poetry, you know? how it aspires to be something very social in many cases, and at the same time, it's also like kind of like a sort of niche, geeky thing, right? That poets are into, right?
Yeah, but I always say, like, especially reading live to an audience where I know there's not a lot of practicing poets, like, it's very generous of you to bring your attention to this form for this 20 minutes or 45 minutes, because in many cases it won't not all the nuances will sink in, but something will catch. And that thing that catches is maybe the root of your attention to the technique. So the attention to the technique activates the voice and the body. And so suddenly you're opening the body to the ideas, and this idea of, or that distinction between the political and the something else becomes really false and useless, right? Because in real time, the speaking body, the listening body are in that sway, in that music, in that tide. And at the same time with the ideas, at the same time with the arguments in the poems.
I have a question for you, right? And sort of, returning on that, when you were a child, were you exposed to poetry?
So the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is an image, a lived image of seeing my mother lay out a dress with spaghetti straps that she was going to go dancing in that night in the late 70s. So she was going to go to a disco. And so there's something about that image that has always stayed with me, is like somebody who was larger than life in my eyes, and who cared enough about their body and their time to celebrate that beauty and to take it out, you know, in a context where not a lot of other people were celebrating her. And so that's the first thing that comes to mind. Like, did I experience poetry? I don't think, not a lot read to me, no, but those moments happened, and they sunk into my attention, you know. I remember, I know she read me The Little Prince.
Yeah, I was gonna, well, that's pretty there, Farid. I mean, not to deny, right, what you're describing is true and incredible, right? But I also, like, it could be something like, you know, like a lullaby, or like como que formas de poesía para niños, which are so often rhymed, right? But I don't know about you, but a lot of those like sounds and rhyme schemes are sort of imprinted into me, right? So, you know, as you say, in the body, right? So when I hear the el octasílabo, right, I'm like, I'm a kid almost again, in a way. It's like a kid. It's a pretty catchy sort of like casi como like a cradle, right? It's like a rocking happening, you know.
So, okay, so in that vein, you said to me the other day that this book started as a commission to speak to children. And I picked up on the necessarily dark moment in the poem. You know, they erase their own faces, confused, talking about the Secretary of Education and that malfeasance and stuff. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that initial point of entry for the project, and then how that leads to thinking about that multiverse, maybe.
Cindy Jimenez Vera ran Ediciones Agua Dulce, and actually she's sort of she's a librarian, and she specializes in different kinds of children's literature. And she asked me, you know, if I was interested in writing a children's book, and my immediate response was like, my subject matter tends to be very heavy, and, you know, what I could do might be of interest to you. And she answered being like, well, that's actually the kind of children's books I'm interested in. I think if I'm correct, she also like had a fascination, was obsessed with children's books like from the Spanish Civil War era, you know, and like sort of like talking about these really heavy things and other material, right? And she was at the time starting a series. She wanted to start a series and she wanted to be part of that series. When I began writing these poems, a lot of them were more like the last poem I read. They were rhymed, they had different rhyme schemes. I was working with endecasílabo, with like just alejandrinos. I was trying. I have written in rhyme before, but it's really hard. It's like one of the hardest things, and at the same time, I wanted that challenge. And then the press shut down, but I kept writing this book, and it took a different direction. I started thinking of it more like sort of questioning why I would want to write for children if I don't plan on ever having children. I don't want children for myself, and also my reasons for not wanting to have children, which have always been very intense. And so I think I realized along the way that I had put to one side the question of the future, sort of, right? That it's a lot easier to be critical of the present for me. And I asked myself why, in principle, I believe in the future, right? I believe in a different world. And I think I realized I'd become very disillusioned with a lot of leftist movements I'd been a part of, even though I believed in the same, I wanted to fight for the same things. And so I realized a lot of the movement language felt punitive, and rather than, and sort of like sort of by absence of, that things were going to change. And, and then I started thinking, well, maybe part of what we need is something to be able to envision, right, a future. And I remembered often, right, being told that independence was, people would tell me they believed in independence, but they didn't see it as anything practical, right? That was the main argument, right? That they couldn't envision that future. And so it became like a question I was, I kind of became obsessed with in the book. In that poem in particular, right, it's sort of the beginning section, which I feel is a continuity of my previous work in many ways, right? Sort of coming back to Puerto Rico, seeing all these abandoned houses, people who left, also just sort of the absence that so many schools shutting down, like as buildings, as structures left, is painful. Like right where I am in Santurce right now, there's like, you go down one street to the right and there's La Luchetti, and it's shut down. You go across here to El Museo de Arte Contemporáneo. Next to it is also a gigantic school that was shut down. So it's everywhere, right? And they're beautiful structures with a long history. And
there's a piece in the book where the house is speaking, and it's like, they want me to be a house, but soy ruina. I am ruins.
I'm ruins, yeah. And beautiful ruins. That's what's painful about it, right? It's so easy to romanticize them because they are even as ruins, very beautiful. But it's also like a state of sort of like a limbo, like this structure that is probably going to be turned into a hotel, or they're going to try, and the question of what will happen and what the future is feels sort of like that structure, right? And that poem also, like the person who's Tita, the figure of Tita, and I never really explained this, but she's actually my great grandmother, and she was one of the first people who read me, I guess, what you could call poems. They were like little songs like Mambrú se fue a la guerra, qué dolor, qué pena. She taught me that one, or and she was very radical and very, she shaped me. She'd wake me up in the middle of the night and show me the moon, so I'd see the moon, right? And so I wanted to have her, right, as the person who was the teacher, right, in this scenario, because it's very intimate, and sort of like Virgil guiding Dante, right? I sort of wanted her to be our guide through this. and it's sad because it's a poem that's like a lot of these poems feel like the people I'm describing feel sort of faceless in a way. But I try to recover that in the address later on in the book. So I kind of enter it in the space of like wandering maybe through the gates of hell and like, you know, seeing this situation in which we all are right, and which we all sort of like, in which buildings have a voice, but people don't necessarily have a voice, you know. I think that answered your question pretty thoroughly. I'm sorry to talk so much in these. I get nervous when I start.
No, it's beautiful. So I'm looking at the time, and I have
we have very little left, but we have.
So I have a request that you may not want to follow up on, but you posted just yesterday an excerpt of a new work, an epic poem, an epic trans poem, or a trans epic, that I think just really blew me away. And I wondered if you might close us out by reading that excerpt or some.
Wow, yeah, absolutely. Okay, I would absolutely love to do that. Actually, it's would be my pleasure. I'm going to, yeah, cool. Okay. I don't think I've read this to anyone, this particular part. So, vamos a ver. Chévere. Dale. Okay. This is the first canto, and the epic has a title which I'm pretty sure I'm sticking to, which is Algarabía, which is like a ruckus sort of rabble, but actually comes from like hablaba from this sort of anonymous poem, and it's like hablaba en árabe, you know. It's and it's sort of like the notion that the Arabic then is illegible and it becomes ruckus in the Spanish. Nada, long explanation, sorry. Okay. Falóme en algarabía, como aquel que bien la sabe, anónimo de yo me era Moraima. Canto 1. Según la eterna transformación, nací el día que un dios me violó en su patio la playa. Con desespero posesivo le arrebató el silencio a la arena. Tras el robo, Poseidón no fue brusco. Al quitarme el nombre, Cainis me ofreció una piel impenetrable, un cascarón de disculpas. Hoy quiero ser hombre, me queman las ansias de ser aguerrido y audaz capitán peleando en la España febril de Valencia, asido a las filas del bando leal. Así llegué a ser Ceneo, un hombre mejorado, un hombre improvisado, un soldado que peleó más duro, más rápido y con menos que los anteriores, pero no recuerdo aquella transformación. Mi origen no conoce su título de calle o escuela, solo el nombre Cenex, una guarnición erigida en un mapa militar. Nací dispersado, no hombre, nací muerto, morí en vida y vivo en muerte, en las tripas de un recuerdo, con mis 40 amigos sosteniéndose, en apartamentos con renta empinada, no mascotas y no gente local, donde no hay garantías tampoco. En las salas sin podar, descongelada la siembra, repartimos los frutos en bandejas. Nuestra historia no sostiene hazañas porque amamos y morimos en el campo de batalla. Si termina la guerra, no podemos regresar. No nos esperan familias que nos olvidaron. Oh, musa, mi lengua pesa, mi canto es torpe, cae sobre el camino, mi canto es un banquete de lechos, alabado el cable preñado de changos, alabá la fila en Capri y la cortatelas, alabaos los estudios de suelo, alabanza para las manos que hacen casquetas, alabanza para las bocas que maman e izan bichos, alabanza en la playa tras el muro, alabanza en la sangre positiva, alabanza en el silencio, algarabía, que esos son los trabajadores que siguen creando un país movedizo. Y así canto una fuga de gas que explota gloriosamente en zapaterías de charola ensanchadas en escarcha. Todas las mañanas visito a mis 40 para el día, los visto, les beso en los cachetes y les preparo almuerzo. En los trenes casi rozamos las ropas. Ojo, de las damas y andamos apegados a los hombres que están seguros de que siempre lo han sido. Estamos a punto de robar las caras jóvenes y drenar a dones de sus cuentas de ahorros implacables, rotativos, desarmadores sobre las aguas, sirenas en las rocas, convidándolos a morir y a que se unan a nuestras formas imposibles. Es de día, así se mide el tiempo, por eso no conseguimos trabajo. Ya elegí la esquina donde dejaré mis cosas cuando esta piel se canse de cambiar, cual sofá con polilla o pantalla que no prende. Tomo mi tiempo, completo mis tareas, escogí a mis 40 y cada uno ha traído un pito para perros que ladran tras portones que mantienen lo intacto. Canto 1. According to the eternal transformation, I was born the day I was raped by a god on his backyard beach. Desperate and possessive, he snatched silence from sand. After the theft, Poseidon wasn't rough. When taking my name, Canis, he offered me impenetrable skin, a shell coated with apologies. Today, I want to be a man. I burn with the desire to be a brave and audacious captain fighting in Valencia's feverish Spain, be bound to the loyal ranks. And here I'm quoting Julia de Burgos. That's how I came to be. Canis, a man improved, a man improvised, a soldier who fought harder, faster, and with less than any before. But I remember no transformation. My origin dawns no street or school, only the name, Senex, a garrison erected on a military map. I was born dispersed, not man. I was born dead, died in life, and live in death, in the guts of a memory with my 40 friends, keeping alive in apartments with steep rent, no pets and no locals, where there are also no guarantees, in a living room unmowed, the harvest defrosted, we give out the fruits in trays. Our history can't sustain great feats because we love and die in battle. If the war ends, we can't return. There are no waiting families. We are forgotten. Oh, muse, my tongue weighs. My song is clumsy. It falls across the path. My song is a banquet of ferns. Praise be the wire pregnant with changos. Praise be the line in Capri and the cloth cutter. Praise be the soil studies. Praise be the hands that give hand jobs. Praise be the mouths that suck and raise dicks. Praise be the beach behind the wall. Praise be the positive blood. Praise be the algarabia silence, the gabble silence, for these are the workers that keep building a shifting country. And so I sing a gas leak that explodes gloriously in shoe stores with patent leather soaked in glitter. Each morning I dress my 40 for the day. I kiss their cheeks and make them lunch on trains. We almost graze women's danger clothes and stand perilously near men who are sure they've always been. Here we are forever about to steal young faces and drain gentlemen of funds, implacable, rotative, disarming on the water, sirens on rocks, inviting men to die and join us in our impossible forms. It is morning. This is how we measure time, and this is why we can't find work. I've picked the curb where I will shed my things when the skin tires and finally settles, with which moth-eaten couch or broken screen. I take my time, I finish my chores, I've picked my 40, and each has brought a whistle for dogs that bark behind gates, keeping everything intact.
Thank you very much. That was amazing.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm sorry we went over time and answered so perfect.
It was excellent. Yeah.
So good. Thank you, Raquel.
Thank you so much, Farid. Siempre.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.
Have a good night, everyone.